Sign the papers and walk away, Claire. My father, Richard, said it so calmly that for a second I thought I had misunderstood him. Across the conference table, my older brother Ethan sat in an expensive charcoal suit, wearing the same confident smile he had perfected over the years. My mother, Diane, avoided my eyes. Then my father pushed a document toward me. Your severance, he said. $50,000. You sign, resign, and disappear quietly. I looked down at the papers, then I looked back at him. You're asking me to give up my patents for $50,000? Richard's expression hardened. Stop acting like this company belongs to you. That sentence hurt more than the money ever could, because 8 years earlier, this company had barely been worth anything. Back then, our family business operated out of a modest office in Austin, Texas. My father handled investors. My mother managed public relations. Ethan was the face of the company, and I was the person who actually built things. I was 27 when I developed the first version of our automated industrial system. I spent nights in a tiny laboratory with vending machine coffee, broken prototypes, and an old blue notebook filled with calculations. The first time the machine successfully detected an unexpected obstacle and adjusted itself, I laughed out loud. I knew we had something special. Ethan took the technology to an industry conference. He was good at presentations, very good. Investors loved him. When someone asked how he had developed the system, Ethan smiled toward the back of the room where I stood. For one brief second, I thought he would mention my name. He didn't. Later, my mother squeezed my arm. Ethan needs the spotlight, she told me. You never liked attention anyway. So I accepted it. I built. Ethan presented, Dad negotiated, Mom polished the story, and our company grew, but there was something my family apparently never understood. The core patents belonged to me. I had created the original technology using my own equipment, my own savings, and my own research. The company had permission to use it. It did not own it. Years earlier, a licensing attorney had warned me never to surrender ownership simply because I trusted my family. I listened. At the time, I thought the paperwork was nothing more than protection. I never imagined it would eventually become the one thing standing between my family and an $80 billion payday. Then Ethan started attending secret meetings. My calendar invitations disappeared. My access to financial reports became limited. And suddenly, everyone was talking about a mysterious buyer. One evening, my father casually mentioned the number, $80 billion. I nearly dropped my fork. The next morning, a document appeared in my inbox. It requested my written consent to transfer the technology license after the acquisition. I read it 3 times. Then I called an independent attorney named Laura Bennett. She studied the agreement carefully. Finally, she looked at me. Claire, she said, they can sell the company. She tapped the patent documents, but they cannot sell your core technology without your permission. For the first time, I understood my family wasn't asking me to sign routine paperwork. They were asking me to hand them the key to their entire $80 billion deal, and I decided I wasn't signing anything. 3 days after Laura told me not to sign anything, my family changed tactics. My father stopped calling me directly. My mother started leaving emotional voicemails, and Ethan suddenly became very interested in my schedule. At first, I tried to ignore it. Then I noticed something strange. Meetings I had attended for years were happening without me. Documents that normally came through my inbox were being sent to Ethan instead. Even engineers who once came directly to my office were suddenly asking whether they were allowed to discuss certain projects with me. It was obvious they were slowly pushing me out. That evening, my mother called. Claire, Ethan is under enormous pressure, she said softly. This acquisition means everything to him. I stared out my kitchen window. Mom, the patents aren't Ethan's. There was a long silence. Why are you making this about ownership? Because it is ownership. Her voice became colder. You've always had trouble letting your brother have his moment. I hung up. The next morning, my father appeared at my office. He placed an envelope on my desk. 50,000. I opened it. The severance agreement was exactly what Laura had warned me about. I would resign, I would transfer my rights, I would waive future claims, and I would remain silent about the circumstances. I looked at my father. You're offering me $50,000 for something worth billions. His face reddened. You're not the center of this company. No, I replied. Apparently, I'm the obstacle, he walked out. That afternoon, I sent the agreement to Laura. Her response was simple: do not sign. I didn't. Then the family campaign began. People started telling me I was emotional, difficult, unstable, too attached to old ideas. My mother even told relatives that I was struggling with the pressure of the acquisition. I knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted everyone to believe that when I eventually refused, I was acting out of jealousy. Then I discovered something worse. My longtime financial advisor, Daniel, had been meeting privately with Ethan. I found them together at a restaurant downtown. A contract folder sat between them. Daniel looked uncomfortable when he saw me. Outside, he finally admitted the truth. Ethan had offered him a senior position after the acquisition, a massive salary, a bonus, a place near the top of the new company. You knew what they were planning, I said. Daniel looked away. I knew where the deal was going, that betrayal hurt, but it also taught me something. The people around my family weren't protecting me. They were protecting the money, so I stopped explaining myself. Laura began preserving every email, contract, access record, payment, and communication connected to the acquisition. Meanwhile, Ethan became more confident. He started acting like the $80 billion deal was already complete. At a family dinner, he even raised his glass. To the future, everyone smiled. I didn't, because sitting quietly in my bag was the old blue notebook containing the earliest records of the technology they were trying to sell. They thought I was scared. They thought I would eventually surrender. They thought money would make me disappear. They had forgotten one important thing. I wasn't fighting for their company. I was protecting what I had built, and I was about to let them make their biggest mistake. The first real warning came at the company's annual celebration. My mother had organized the event at our family estate outside Austin. Investors filled the rooms, executives stood beneath framed photographs of our family, and Ethan was everywhere. He shook hands, accepted compliments, and talked about the acquisition as if the $80 billion deal already belonged to him. I stayed near the edge of the room. Then I heard my mother introducing Ethan to a group of investors. This is the man who took our technology to the next level. I almost laughed. She hadn't mentioned me, not once. Later, I walked toward the dining room and saw Ethan speaking to one of our engineers, Megan. She was holding several presentation folders. Ethan suddenly raised his voice. "You missed a formatting issue." Megan looked embarrassed. "I used the version I was given." Ethan smiled. "Maybe engineering needs people who can actually follow instructions." I stepped forward. "That presentation came from my team." Ethan turned. His smile disappeared. "If there's a problem, talk to me." "I am talking to you." The room became quieter. Ethan took a sip of wine. "You really can't stand one night without being the center of attention, can you?" I stared at him. After everything I had built, he was calling me attention-seeking. "I don't need attention," I said. "I need credit where it's deserved." His jaw tightened, then he lifted his glass. The movement looked accidental. It wasn't red wine spilled across my cream-colored blouse and jacket. The room went silent. Ethan widened his eyes. "Oh, Claire, I'm sorry it slipped." I looked at my father. He stared at his drink. I looked at my mother. She leaned closer. "Please don't make a scene." Something inside me finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. It simply became still. I walked into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Red wine covered my clothes. My eyes looked exhausted. I opened my handbag. My old blue notebook was still inside. I placed my hand over it. Then I called Laura. "I'm done protecting them." Her response was immediate. "Then we stopped treating this like a family disagreement." The next morning, Laura sent formal notices to the company and the buyer. I had not consented to any transfer of my patents. Every email was preserved. Every contract was copied. Every unusual access request was documented. And suddenly, the people who had ignored me for years became nervous. My father called twice. I didn't answer. My mother sent a message saying I was destroying the family. I didn't respond. Then Ethan made his biggest mistake. He hired an outside contractor to investigate whether there was another way to obtain access to parts of the technology without my approval. The contractor backed away after realizing the legal situation. Laura obtained the payment records and communications. Now we had evidence. Still, my family pushed forward. T believed the buyer would ignore everything because the deal was worth $80 billion. They were wrong. A final meeting was scheduled. Everyone would be there: my father, my mother, Ethan, the buyer's legal team, and me. The night before, Laura called, "Are you ready?" I looked at the blue notebook on my desk. Yes. For what? I smiled. For them to finally learn the difference between family property and my property. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom carrying that notebook. My family thought I was entering their final victory. They had no idea I was carrying the one thing capable of stopping it. My father was already standing when I entered the boardroom. Ethan sat beside him in a charcoal suit, looking completely relaxed. My mother sat quietly with a porcelain cup in front of her. Across the table were David Walker and 3 attorneys representing the buyer. Laura sat beside me. My father didn't ask me to sit. Instead, he looked at me with the same expression he'd used when I was a child and had disappointed him. "We're handing everything to Ethan," he said. Then he pointed toward the door. "Now leave." I looked at Ethan. E smiled. Then I looked at the buyer's representatives. "Everything?" My father frowned. "The company, the contracts, the technology, everything." I nodded slowly. "So you sold the company without my patents?" My mother gave a small laugh. "We sold our business, Claire." David Walker suddenly stopped writing. He closed the folder in front of him, then he stood. "Actually," he said, "you haven't." My father's face changed. David continued, "This transaction has not closed." Silence filled the room. "The funds have not been released," he said, "and there is a serious ownership issue." My father stared at him. "What ownership issue?" David looked directly at me. Laura answered, "Claire never signed the required consent to transfer the core patents." One of the buyer's attorneys opened the licensing agreement. He read the relevant section carefully. Then he looked at my father. "The technology rights cannot be transferred to a new controlling owner without the patent holder's written approval." My father turned toward me. "You didn't sign?" "No." Ethan suddenly stood. "This is ridiculous." Laura remained calm. "No, what's ridiculous is attempting to close an $80 billion acquisition without obtaining the legal consent required for its most valuable technology." Ethan pointed at me. "She works for us." Laura slid the patent records across the table. "She created the original system before the company received its license." David studied the documents. Then my father tried another argument. "This is a family disagreement." Laura placed another folder on the table. "The $50,000 severance agreement." David opened it. His expression became colder. "This agreement requires her to transfer her rights and waive future claims?" "Yes," Laura said. "And you offered this immediately before closing?" My father said nothing. Ethan stepped forward. "You don't understand the situation." David looked at him. "I understand it perfectly." Then Laura opened the final folder. Payment records, messages, access logs, the outside contractor Ethan had hired. Everything was there. Ethan's face went pale. My father slowly turned toward him. "What did you do?" Ethan swallowed. "I was protecting the deal." David shook his head. "No, you created additional liability inside an acquisition that already has a fundamental ownership problem." One of the buyer's attorneys whispered something to David. David nodded. Then he looked around the room. "We're terminating the transaction." My father froze. "What?" "The acquisition is over." Ethan's chair scraped backward. "No." David gathered his documents. "No $80 billion payment will be released." My mother finally looked at me. Her eyes were wet. "You did this to us." I shook my head. "No." I picked up my blue notebook. "You did this when you decided I didn't matter." Then I stood. For 8 years, I had walked into rooms where Ethan received credit for my work. For 8 years, I had stayed quiet because I believed family loyalty meant sacrificing myself. Not anymore. I walked toward the door. Behind me, nobody spoke. The $80 billion deal was dead. And for the first time, my family finally understood that I had never been the weakest person in the room. I had simply been the quietest. The $80 billion deal didn't collapse in one dramatic moment. It fell apart piece by piece. First, the buyer officially walked away. Then investors started asking questions. The company had been valued around technology. It could no longer guarantee it owned. Contracts were reviewed. Financing was questioned. Days. The confidence that had surrounded Ethan disappeared almost overnight. My father, Richard, had spent years believing money made him untouchable. Now every decision was being examined. Within months, he was no longer running the company. Ethan lost his position soon after. The investigation into the unauthorized access attempt became serious, and the people involved began protecting themselves. I stayed out of it. Laura handled everything. I didn't call reporters. I didn't celebrate Ethan's downfall. I didn't send anyone information designed to embarrass my family. I simply told the truth when I was asked. That was enough. My mother struggled the most with the hanging story. For years, she had controlled how people saw our family. She could turn an argument into a misunderstanding. She could make Ethan look like the hero. She could make me look difficult. But legal documents don't care about family stories. Emails don't care about reputation. Contracts don't care who your parents are. Slowly, people learned what had actually happened. I hadn't destroyed the company. I hadn't stolen anything. I hadn't sabotaged the acquisition. I had simply refused to transfer property I legally owned. 6 months later, Daniel contacted me. He asked if we could meet. I agreed. We sat across from each other in a quiet coffee shop where we had once spent hours discussing business. He looked exhausted. I made the wrong choice, he said. I didn't answer. I knew what they were doing, he continued. I should have warned you. Yes, I said. He lowered his eyes. I was afraid of losing my opportunity. I understood that, but understanding wasn't the same as forgiveness. I don't hate you, Daniel. He looked relieved, but I don't trust you anymore. The relief disappeared. I stood and left. By then, I had already started something new. Megan joined me. We built a smaller company around the technology I had originally created. This time, things were different. Every inventor received credit. Every contract was explained. Every ownership right was clearly documented. Nobody's family name mattered more than the work. When our first major presentation arrived, I carried my old blue notebook onto the stage. I didn't need it anymore, but I wanted it there. It reminded me of the woman who had once stood silently at the back of a room while someone else accepted applause for her work. That woman had believed staying quiet kept the family together. I finally understood that silence had only been keeping me trapped. Almost a year after the boardroom disaster, my mother called. She told me my father was struggling. There were medical bills, appointments, expenses they couldn't easily manage anymore. Then she asked me for money. I stared at her message for several minutes. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part remembered that despite everything, they were still my parents. So I called Laura. Verify the medical bills, I said. I'll pay the essential expenses directly. Laura paused. And your parents? They don't get access to my business or my life. I didn't send cash. I didn't demand an apology. I simply helped where help was necessary. Then I closed the door again. For the first time, I felt no guilt. I had finally learned that compassion didn't require surrendering my boundaries, and my family had finally learned something too. They could lose a fortune, but I wasn't going to lose myself with it. Almost a year after the boardroom meeting, I stood in the window of my new office and looked across Austin. The city looked different from up there, or maybe I was the one who had changed. Megan called from the conference room. Claire, they're ready for you, icked up my old blue notebook. For years, that notebook had represented everything my family had taken credit for. Now it represented something else, my beginning. I walked into the conference room. This time, nobody was waiting for Ethan. Nobody was waiting for my father. They were waiting for me. Our company was smaller than the one my family had built, but it was healthier. Our employees knew who created the technology. Our contracts were transparent. Our ownership records were clear, and nobody had to sacrifice their future just to protect someone else's ego. After the presentation, Megan approached me. You know what I kept thinking while you were speaking? What? You didn't look angry. I smiled. I was angry for a long time. What changed? I looked down at the blue notebook. I realized revenge wasn't getting them to suffer. Megan waited. Revenge was refusing to become the person they expected me to be. That night, I went home alone. I opened the notebook one final time. The earliest pages were messy. Calculations covered the margins. Some formulas had been crossed out. There were coffee stains on several pages. I remembered the 27-year-old woman who had written those notes. She hadn't known about the $80 billion deal. She hadn't known her brother would betray her. She hadn't known her parents would choose money over her. She only knew she had built something and she had protected it. That was enough. I used to believe family loyalty meant staying quiet, giving more for giving faster, accepting disrespect because blood was supposed to matter more than boundaries. Now I understand something different. You can love people without trusting them. You can forgive someone without giving them access to you. And you can walk away from your family without becoming cruel. Richard and Diane were still my parents. Ethan was still my brother. But they no longer controlled my future. The $80 billion acquisition had disappeared. The company changed, their lives changed. Mine did too. But I didn't lose $80 billion. I never owned it. What I gained was far more valuable: my independence, my name, my work, and my peace. Sometimes people count you out because they think you have nothing left to fight with. They don't realize that the quiet person at the table may be holding the one thing everyone else needs. My family thought they could sell everything and leave me with nothing. Instead, they taught me the most important lesson of my life. Never confuse family loyalty with surrender, and never sign away your future just because someone tells you that keeping it makes you selfish. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments. What would you have done if your own family tried to take credit for something you built? And if you believe that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, hit like, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more emotional stories about betrayal, family, justice, and finding the strength to walk away. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't watching the people who hurt you lose everything all. Sometimes it's building a life they can no longer control. And that was the day I finally understood. They didn't exile me from their world. They accidentally set me free.